First up, the most obvious one. It's Reece James versus Ben Chilwell. And these two guys have been in the conversation since the day the prices were released. As you can see on this graphic on Fantasy Football Hub, Ben Chilwell had more big chances, higher XG, more shots in the box, more shots on target, more shots, more touches in the box per 90 than Reece James. But James excelled per 90 over Chilwell in the more creative areas of the game. Expected assists, big chances created. They were about the same for crosses, and James beat him in terms of final third passes. So this does seem to be the battle of the assister and the goal scorer. Albeit this is a limited sample size of data based on Chilwell's lack of minutes last season. We can also see here on the player comparison tool on Hub that both these guys have taken corners in their time. It's always nice to have that set piece threat. You can also see Chilwell's ludicrous points per start stat here of 9.15 versus James's 6.8. Now, as I say, a very limited sample size. He did score 3 goals in a short amount of time on the pitch with an XG of just 1.7, so you could say he outperformed that XG, and maybe over a larger data sample that would equalise out, and maybe Chilwell wouldn't be such a standout option. With both players at 6 million, so nothing to point me in either direction with the price, if I had to pick one going into the season, and I've been flip-flopping all pre-season, it's going to be Reece James. I'm going to pick the guaranteed starts, the guaranteed points, hopefully. So Reece James my pick in this head-to-head. Another huge one, and we're getting controversial out of the gate. Haaland versus Kane. Okay, so Haaland and Kane, when we have a look at it, let's look first at the ownership. If you want to stick with a pack and play it safe, you really do need to go Erling Haaland. Harry Kane is definitely the differential premium forward here, with so many people opting for the younger, shinier, new player in the league. In 37 appearances last season, Kane had 17 goals and 9 assists. It's worth noting that 17 goals was a little low for Harry Kane, really. You know, he's been used to competing for that golden boot, and he was way off it behind teammate Son this year. And Erling Haaland, it is a Bundesliga stat, and there is a notorious drop-off when players go from the Bundesliga into the Premier League, and probably most other leagues, to be fair, because the Bundesliga is nothing but vibes, 3-0s every week. In 23 games over there in a season riddled with injury, he had 20 goals and 5 assists, so that averages out at more than 1 goal involvement per game. So Haaland coming in, it's obviously huge stats behind him, but it is a different league. We'll have to see how it translates. Kane also has a bit of an injury stigma attached to him, but he played over 3,000 minutes last season, which was his most in a long time, since the 15-16 season, I believe. He also has this stigma of being a slow starter. He actually isn't really too slow a starter, but last season he was. He didn't score in his first 4 Premier League games. The German season is much shorter. It's only 34 games as opposed to 38, but Haaland didn't manage even 2,000 minutes. So if we're putting them against each other in terms of who's more likely to be rested due to injury, Kane definitely comes out on top. Effective ownership and staying with the herd, says Haaland. But for me, I want to go with Harry Kane. I think there's enough template in a lot of teams at the minute with the defence big at the back and all the rest. I think this is a place you can set yourself apart or fall behind. I think I'm willing to take the risk and live or die by this in the opening game weeks. You can all ridicule me or you can all praise me in a few weeks' time. I will be going for Harry Kane over Erling Haaland. I'd be interested to see what you think of this head-to-head in particular in the comments. Next up, we're talking about 2 premium defenders coming in at 7 million apiece. Andy Robertson and João Cancelo at Man City. I'm going to talk about these guys in terms of per 90s, so for every 90 minutes played, and that's because they played different amounts of time last season. So if we look at the points they actually achieved, Robertson actually outperformed Cancelo. Robertson scored 6.59 points per 90, whereas Cancelo only managed 5.6. But it's funny because when you look at this in terms of what they were expected to score, so Robertson massively overperformed his expected points and Cancelo just about beat his expected points. As you can see from the graphic on the screen, Robertson actually had more big chances and more key passes. He also had more crosses, more chances created, expected assists, all those things. But Cancelo actually outperformed him in terms of XG, shots in the box, shots on target, total shots, final third passes, strangely. When we convert that to the per 90s I already referenced, Cancelo had 2.26 shots per 90, which is a lot for a defender, versus Robertson's 0.64. And in terms of XG, Cancelo had a 0.16 XG per 90 versus Robertson's 0.09. So much more of a goal threat, but Robertson outperformed Cancelo in terms of points, which is maybe what matters more. Personally, when I look at these two players, I'm going to have them both, I think, but if I had to pick one, it would be Robertson for me. Robertson is my pick of these two, but Cancelo is a surefire way into Pep Roulette and into a nailed City player in your team, so I completely understand both picks. There's very little in it, but if I could only have one, I personally would pick Robertson. Next up, we have to debate Luis Diaz at Liverpool versus a Man City midfielder, and there's a few of them to choose from. We have Foden, Grealish and Mahrez, all between 7 and 8 million. So first I think we need to decide which Man City player we would pick here. Foden isn't in Man City's pre-season tour due to COVID requirements, so I'm going to take him out of the race for now for game week 1, and we'll focus on Mahrez versus Grealish. Mahrez coming in at 8 million, Jack Grealish coming in at 7. Mahrez outperformed Jack Grealish in almost every stat in terms of the attacking ones that you care about last season per 90. He beat him in XG, XA, XGI, big chances created. Mahrez was definitely standout, but Jack Grealish is $1 million cheaper this year, and there is a bit of a feeling among the community that he will have a bigger season than last. More goal involvements would be expected. Erling Haaland's there, you know, he will be bedded into this team a bit more. Mahrez has been there for some time now. Maybe this is Jack's season. At time we're recording, Mahrez is owned by about 6% of managers and Jack Grealish just 4%. A quote just to be aware of is that Mahrez was quoted as saying he thinks he's still on penalties, but he's open to losing them to Haaland. So Haaland might have taken the penalties from Mahrez when Mahrez is on the pitch. That could have a big knock-on effect to his goals scored. And for that reason, among all the rest, the million saving with Jack Grealish, I'm going to pick Jack Grealish as the Man City midfielder of choice for me going into the season. So I'm going to put him up against Luis Diaz now and see who comes out on top. As you can see in the graphic here, Jack Grealish only really beats Diaz when it comes to chances created and final third passes. All the other metrics, Diaz comes out on top. Expected points, goals, big chances, shots in the box, everything. Diaz is coming out on top. And I think if I had to pick Diaz or a Man City midfielder, if we exclude Kevin De Bruyne from that conversation because of price, if we're looking at the kind of mid-priced options, I think Diaz for me is absolutely the pick. He's the cheapest way into that Liverpool front three that's actually viable that we've had in years. Jota looks to be injured going into the season, so Diaz is all but nailed. And having a Liverpool forward, playing as a midfielder, getting 5 points a goal for 8 million, I just think it's absolutely great value. The only trouble is if you already have Mo Salah, doubling up could be a lot, and you might want to differentiate and grab someone from Man City to cover those hauls in case City go and bang a 5-0 win. So I kind of get both. If I have to pick one though, Diaz for me. Let's go and look at a more budget option in midfield now and see who we should pick for that 5.5 million or below slot that we'll have to play in our team. None other than Pedro Neto versus Bailey. Leon Bailey at Aston Villa, and this is a tough one because both had relatively limited minutes last season, and it's really hard to put them against each other with the limited sample size of data. Now on this graphic, Neto does look way better than Bailey, but let's look more at what's actually happening in the real world right now. So Neto has 2 goals in pre-season. He actually has 3 goals if you count a game that happened, I think, back in the 2nd of July against Forest Green Rovers. But a really important thing to note is that he's been playing in a forward role and he is down as a midfielder in the game. Now an interesting thing for Bailey on the other hand is that he's 0.5 million cheaper, and that 0.5 million can go a long way in defence. That could upgrade the likes of a Perisic to a Reece James, for example, or even up top it could get you from a 7.5 forward up to Gabriel Jesus. So there's a lot of uses for that $500,000. And Gerrard has been quoted as saying if he had to pick the real team today, Bailey absolutely starts. And when he actually came from Leverkusen, he came with a lot of hype. His transfer fee was 30 million, and in 30 games he had 9 goals and 9 assists. There's definitely pedigree in this player. It's just about him finding his pace in the Premier League, and maybe it is time. So the thing that swings my decision entirely is the fixture ticker on Hub. Here we see Wolves have got better fixtures than Aston Villa, and you can see that, you know, Villa do have to face up against the likes of Arsenal, City and even West Ham in the first 6 game weeks, whereas Wolves' real challenge is Spurs, and that's in game week 3. Outside that, you could see them scoring in every single game. So for that reason, Pedro Neto at 5.5 million is my choice of these two, but I completely understand if you need to save $500,000, Bailey could be the best 5 million option in the game. Next up, we have a big head-to-head over at Old Trafford where we have Martial versus Rashford. So it's very hard to compare these two based off historic data because the most recent data we have is of last season, and Martial obviously very disappointing, didn't play much at all, and he was off on loan at Sevilla where he disappointed as well. Marcus Rashford on the other hand just had a very disappointing season in general. He was out of sorts and didn't play to his potential, didn't get as much game time as he would have liked, and didn't get as many goals or assists for that reason. But this year they're both fit and firing in pre-season, so let's talk about that and see what that could mean going into next year. Both have played 221 minutes in pre-season pre-season so far. Rashford's got 2 goals so far, but Martial has 3 goals and an assist. Both seem completely rejuvenated under Ten Hag. One is a 6.5 million midfielder in Marcus Rashford, Martial a 7 million forward, so you could argue that the value is with Rashford, but maybe we need a forward at the 7 million price point more than we need to find another mid-priced midfielder. If either of these guys prove to be nailed going into game week 1, I think both could be excellent value. If I had to pick one, it's Rashford for the $500,000 saving, the extra point on a goal. I would pick Rashford here if I had to pick one, but equally, different positions, different price points, so a bit chalk and cheesy, but it's nice to put them together. 2 rejuvenated lads under Ten Hag, and be really interested to see how they do this season. We have a few more to bang out, but before we do, if you want 50% off your hub membership, please use my link, it's in the description. Also, win your mini league or get your money back. If you sign up before that game week 1 deadline, you'll be eligible for this offer, so if you're going to get involved, I'd say get involved now. Next up, we're looking at Callum Wilson versus Ivan Toney. So as you can see here, Ivan Toney was actually much more creative than Callum Wilson last season. Wilson didn't see a lot of game time through injury, which is a concern, but he did have more big chances and higher XG than Toney per 90 when he did play. But the thing that stands out for me between these two guys is the fixtures. Over the first 6 game weeks, Brentford have much better fixtures in my opinion. You can see there Leicester, Man United, maybe they aren't as good as you'd think, but Fulham, Everton and Leeds in 3 of the next 4. Palace aren't even that bad a fixture. Newcastle though on the other hand come out the gate flying with Nottingham, and Brighton isn't actually that bad, but then we've got City and Liverpool in 2 of the next 3 in game week 3 and game week 5. So I think here, if I had to pick one to score more goals of the first 6 game weeks, I'm probably picking Ivan Toney. And even if he doesn't score more goals, based on the data we already looked at there, he does seem to be a little more creative, so maybe he squeaks an assist or 2. Add to that again the injury histories. I think Toney is the standout option here for me, particularly when you take into account the $500,000 saving. The next one's a battle of the giants, and I would say a lot of your drafts don't have either of these players, but I think you should actually be considering having one of them. You really do need one of them. It's Harry Kane and Son. Which one would you pick? So since Conte's come in, it's important to note that Kane has outperformed Son in all the things you care about. XG, XA, XGI, big chances created. Both have been on fire in pre-season. But the more interesting thing for me here is sort of FPL strategy. Kane comes in at $500,000 less, 11.5 million, price matched with Erling Haaland, and you're going to need to pick one of them up top to cover the price point up top, I think, because one of them is likely to bang. And it's also an easy switch to a Ronaldo or a Vardy or anyone else who shows form early season who is a premium price forward. And I've already told you why I'd pick Kane over Haaland. So let's say you've picked Kane up top. That means it's pretty much impossible for you to be finding Son space in your team. With Salah in midfield, all but absolutely nailed in almost every single team, it's going to be really hard to find a space for Son unless you're going for a 3-man play where you have 3 premium players. And if you're going for 3 premium players, you've probably got Salah. As I've already explained why I'd have Kane instead of Haaland, you're probably going to want Man City cover, and you'll probably go for Kevin De Bruyne as that 3rd slot. Maybe you'll go Kane and Haaland, and that's fine. But unfortunately for Son, I think everything I'm saying here points to the fact that it's very, very hard to fit him in our teams this year, as well as he scored last season. And as hot as he's been in pre-season, I just think it's really, really hard to find space for him. But I've no doubt he'll be in our teams at some stage during the season, whenever fixtures or injuries or whatever it happens to be allow it. If I could only have one of these two guys, for me, it's Kane based on all the reasons I've put out there, but I absolutely applaud anyone who has the balls to go for Son for game week 1. This one mightn't be as relevant to most of you, but it's definitely an interesting conversation in FPL, and it's Haaland versus De Bruyne, the 2 most premium assets at Man City, the team I'm guessing are favourites to win the league, who I think are going to win the league, and who are going to score a ton of goals. Haaland is in almost everyone's team for good reason, and De Bruyne has been forgot about because everyone wants to go for the safer option, Salah. But Kevin De Bruyne has looked really sharp in pre-season. Pep Guardiola praising his sharpness and saying he's looking really, really fit, ready to go, ready to kick on from the end of last season. And last season was his best ever season for goals. He had 15 goals last year, is the most he's ever scored in the Premier League, and that was with just 30 appearances. So that's a goal every 2 games he managed last season. It's outrageous. Hand on heart, I believe Kevin De Bruyne will outscore Erling Haaland this season, but I understand why you probably have to pick Haaland based on effective ownership. He's $500,000 cheaper, and just price points within the team. You're going to need to find a premium forward, and it's really hard to fit De Bruyne in with Salah there. So I completely understand people having to go for Haaland, but prediction time, De Bruyne smashes him in terms of points this year, and I think the $500,000 is definitely worth it. I would be shocked if he wasn't in my team at some stage before the end of the season. A couple of really interesting ones before we wrap up. We have Gabriel Jesus up against Saka. I think Jesus is absolutely the standout option here. He's the one I pick every single day of the week. Saka, there are great options in midfield outside Saka. You know, we have the Man City guys, we have Luis Diaz, we mentioned, with Mason Mount, Kulusevski. There are other options at that price in midfield. Even Bruno Mahrez down at 6 million. But up top, once we get past the Kane and Haaland debate, I think it's really hard because no one really stands out. Ronaldo, there's a lot of uncertainty. Jamie Vardy's getting on. And I think Gabriel Jesus will smash this year. And I think he's a really good price at 8 million. There's been a load of different hot takes here today, a load of controversial opinions. They're all just my opinion. I have no doubt there are great arguments against everything I've said, and I'd love to see them in the comments. Let me know who you would pick, any of these you massively disagree with. Get your comments in below and let me know. And if you want to go over and dig into the data on Fantasy Football Hub, please sign up with a link in the description. 50% off on the run up to the start of the new season. Thanks again, see you later, bye bye.